Yeah, I mean, it was insane, the amount of people taking photos without our consent. And we were screaming and shouting, like, please stop.
I think that what we saw when we interviewed you guys was how you were having an incredibly different experience of WNBR from the men.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think certainly as I've discussed this issue with a lot of my friends, the most common response that I've got is, well, you know, what did you expect? And so I think anyone in a privileged position in life, whether it, you know, no matter what kind of privilege it is, you know, there's no point in having that privilege if you can't use it and really, really make the most of it. And so I think the Barefoot Blades idea is really, really brilliant. Yeah.
Design, snapshots capture spirit undefined. Lens sees the freedom flesh.
Alice, welcome to Talking Barefoot. This is not the first time we have spoken, but it is the first time that we're doing a podcast together. And I want to thank you for making the time to sit down and talk with me today. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I think it's the third time that we've spoken, actually, because we met at the World Naked Bike Ride and then we had our call last week and now we're chatting properly. So yeah, no, I'm really, really grateful to be here.
Well, I mean, I have loved both of the previous two times that we have met. And yes, and we will discuss both of those because, well, first of all, we met at the London World Naked Bike Ride in June this year. The World Naked Bike Ride is an extraordinary thing that's been going since, I think, 2003. I think it started in Spain. Is that your understanding?
I have no idea, actually. I know it's been going on for a long time, but I couldn't put a timestamp on it. Yeah, I don't know.
Right. And but it runs all over the world. It's been running in London since I think I first went along to it. I just started photography, so it would have been around about 2007, something like that, 2008, that I went along and then came back this year to make a documentary film with Barefoot Man about London World Naked Bike Ride, because I thought there's a lot of synergy between our two projects. You came along as a participant. And tell me, Alice, tell me about how that happened. How did you come to be at WNBR?
It's a good question. I had heard about it for a couple of years, but every time that it happened, I just wasn't available on the day. And then I think just 2 days before the 2024 one, I saw someone post about it on Instagram. And so I was reminded of it. And luckily I was free on the day. And I said to my friends, come on, we've got to do this. And luckily they were up for it, which is great because I haven't got many girlfriends or boyfriends that would be up for cycling through London completely naked. But yeah, we arrived and I mean, it was absolutely hilarious. We started at the Tower Bridge meetup point and yeah, we took it from there really.
I think that's the one that we started out from, because we started out in Hackney. We interviewed some people in Hackney and then we went to Tower Hill to that, to Tower Gardens, I think it is.
It was that one. Yeah, it was very, very busy. So we probably missed each other at that point. But yeah, there was a lot of people there. Yeah, there were a
lot of people. There were a lot of people getting ready to take part in the ride. And there were a lot of people who had clearly turned up as tourists, right?
Yeah, and I was quite shocked by the amount of people that were there that were non-participants. I don't really know what I expected before I got there, but when I did arrive, I think the amount of people that were there was certainly a higher percentage of people that weren't participating in the race, and they were just there to kind of spectate and take photos and gawp at everyone's genitals.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, I think gawping is a good word. I was kind of quite glad I had my high vis jacket as like official film crew, but because it kind of gave me some validation. And but a lot of people clearly didn't feel they needed it, particularly as we later discovered the straight man, I would say, is one of the conclusions I reached. And so you guys cycled off from Tower Hill to Forum Magnum Square by London Eye, and that is where we met. But actually, we haven't talked about too much about your experience of the ride itself from Tower Hill to Forum Magnum Square, because I'm wondering if it's slightly less awkward being naked when you're actually moving on the ride than when you're in those static locations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll just go through kind of what happened from the moment we
Please.
arrived. So I was there with two girlfriends, and we got there and we were fully dressed when we arrived. We were on our bikes with all of our clothes on. And then, there was like a huge amount of naked people in the gardens, and then also a huge amount of clothed spectators. And we just actually instantly felt fairly uncomfortable, and like we didn't really want to take our clothes off, which was quite a disappointment because, we were really, really excited to do something that extraordinary.
Yeah.
And then a lady called Jen came up to us who was with a guy, and she was like, "Hey girls, like, are you here for the naked bike ride?" And we were like, "Yes." And she was like, "I feel really uncomfortable, but like, let's just stick together." And, she had her friend who was a guy with her. So we felt like we kind of had him as a form of protection. And then the moment we took our tops off, we were like completely surrounded by people trying to take pictures of us without consent. And, we were like mobbed. We could hardly even move, with people just, staring at us, taking pictures. And it was all very, very strange and horrible. And then the bike ride was kind of like getting going. And so we all had to get to the line to move, which meant that the people mobbing us had to move out the way, thank goodness. And then, yeah, I mean, it was insane, the amount of people taking photos without our consent. And we were screaming and shouting, like, "Please stop." And then we were kind of taking the piss out of them, saying like, "Oh, like, why aren't you taking pictures of all the men? And, why are you focusing on us?" And then Jen, the lady that we just met there, she actually ended up like physically batting someone's phone out of their hand because they were so in our faces with it. But then at the same time, it was also quite funny because we did have safety in numbers. There was a huge amount of people there being naked. If I was just naked alone at that point, it would have been horrific, and it still was horrific. But at least we were kind of all in it together. And then once the bike ride started, things instantly relaxed because, the spectators, they couldn't chase us on our bikes. They had to kind of spread out. And as we were going down the roads, it was more just kind of passers-by that didn't know that it was happening, that just kind of looked at us in absolute disbelief. And then at that point, I started to feel much more comfortable, and I was loving it. And I took my pants off then as well because I just felt a lot more comfortable. And yeah, I mean, so then we got to what was the name of the place that I met you? I can't remember.
Forum Magnum Square, I believe.
Yeah, so then we got there. I mean, that was after quite a lot of bike riding time. I think it was probably about an hour because, I mean, it wasn't a particularly long route, but there were a lot of stops along the way. We had to wait for all the cyclists to catch up with us. And the ride up until that point was really, really great. All the people kind of on the side of the road just was staring at us, but it was a much more kind of, what on earth is this kind of staring, as opposed to a kind of perverted zoological, like treating us like animals in a zoo kind of staring. And I felt great waving at people as I passed by. It was hilarious.
Well, that's part of the joy of WNBR, isn't it? I mean, that's part of the spirit of it. It's not meant to be heavy. It's meant to be quite light-hearted, making a serious point. Yeah. But it's.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favourite bits was when like a huge load of police drove past, and like we all were just completely butt naked on our bikes, listening to, I think we were playing "Sexy and I Know It" out of our speaker, and just kind of cycling through London, not really giving a damn about what people were thinking of us. Yeah, that was brilliant. And then we got to the meetup point where we met you guys. Well, we were there for quite a long time before we met you guys, and so again, we were like stopped and static, and that just gave people the opportunity to, again, just kind of like crowd around us. And this time it was the participants, not the spectators, because I think there was so many participants at this spot because it was the meeting spot of where all the different routes from the cyclists met up. So there wasn't actually really space for members of the public to come in. But yeah, it was all naked male participants coming up to us, some of which were asking for pictures, some of which weren't. But then what would kind of happen would be one person would ask for a photo. We'd say yes, only because you asked nicely or something. And then suddenly, just because they were allowed to have their camera in front of us, 30 other men would take that opportunity because we were posing and stand behind them and just take photos endlessly. And I mean, legally, like, they can do that. We're in a public place. They do have the right to. But I think with us really like screaming, like, please stop, it was really disrespectful, like really disrespectful. Yeah.
That's, I mean, from our perspective, I was with my film crew. There were like 5 of us all together, and we spotted this group of men, and it was like there was this energy, this fizzing kind of, and it's like, what's going on here? And so I kind of pushed my way through because I had my high vis, so I was able to kind of say, official crew, let me through. And we got to the middle of this scrum, and there you were with Jem and some of the other women that we interviewed you guys, and I don't know. I mean, I think, in a way you were surprised by this, and so was I, and maybe neither of us entirely should have been, but there we are. Now we know, but what we saw was, and you've just described it in even more detail than I think had been aware of. It's like the sense of entitlement where if you've said to one guy, it's okay for you to take a picture because you've asked nicely. All the guys who didn't ask nicely are like, well, you can't do that for him and not us.
Exactly.
And it's like, where does that sense of entitlement come from? How is that a rule? How does that make that okay? You're not entitled. You don't have some God-given right to take pictures of this woman. As you said, there's maybe legally, it's a gray area because you are in public. However, if you guys were making clear that you didn't want to be photographed, then I think it actually does become a legal issue because it's being a nuisance. It's being you're disturbing somebody else's peace. And I know that one of our other contributors to that documentary, he lives in France, and he said it's illegal in France to do what we do at the World Naked Bike Ride, because you can't go nude in public. So they don't have a Paris.
I think it's illegal in the
ride.
UK as well, though.
My understanding is that it's not illegal. There's no specific law against nudity. It's basically, if it's deemed by the police on the basis of public complaints to be a disturbance of the peace, then they can act.
I see. Okay.
That's my understanding, and I could be wrong. If anybody knows the law, please feel free to comment below. That's once we're on YouTube, obviously. My feeling is it's not illegal because ever since I've been going to WNBR, it's the police have been quite supportive, really, and I think they used to actually be more present on the ride. I think this year, because there were quite a lot of other protests going on around Palestine and stuff, I think that the police force was more stretched, which was one of the reasons I believe that WNBR had brought in their own security force. And the other thing, of course, about the security team that they brought in was that they were all women, and that was actually about being more aware of women's situations. But I think that what we saw when we interviewed you guys was how you were having an incredibly different experience of WNBR from the men.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think certainly as I've discussed this issue with a lot of my friends, the most common response that I've got is, well, what did you expect? To kind of like prance around London naked, like, why are you surprised at this? And to be honest, I think they're quite right. I am beginning to think, okay, why did this shock me? But I do still think that in this day and age, men have had enough education in this country by this point to not treat women differently. And it's shocking that this is still happening. I've lost my train of thought. What was the question again?
It's. I think you're making some very good points there. I mean, this is 2024, and we thought the world was becoming a better place. Sometimes we look around us and think, is it though? But you would have thought that all of us would have learned to be a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more considerate, mindful of boundaries, and yet not really. I mean, we saw, there were men who were being looked at, the kind of any man who was under 30, maybe goes to the gym, he was also getting attention, not, I think, in the same way or with the same sense of entitlement that straight male spectators were looking at women. But we did notice that there were quite a lot of female spectators with their camera phones out, particularly, I think, foreign tourists, particularly people, I think, from perhaps cultures where this is like, just like, what? This is too mind-blowing. And so we saw quite a lot of women from Southeast Asia, I think, were there. And one of my team is part Chinese, and she was like, oh my God, everybody here is Chinese. All the women that are like, and it's like, that's a slight exaggeration, but there were a lot of women of Southeast Asian origin. There were a lot of women, I think, were quite curious about the men. And of course, you get a lot of gay men coming along to look at the men. But I've never seen it be as invasive and as aggressive as I saw it being with you women. And it was really what drove us to make the WNBR film, which, for people who haven't seen it, is available in the June issue of Roar Portfolio. That's June 2024. We put out our World Naked Bike Ride video. I think it's like about a 30-minute video, something like that. And I know that you watched it just before we spoke last week. And it was the first time you'd seen it. Tell me what you thought.
I was really, really impressed by it, actually. I think the angle that you guys had was brilliant. I think you were very balanced. And I think it came from a real point of curiosity from you. You were trying to find out what the story was with the way that men and women were treated differently at the ride. And you really kind of like got a very good amount of footage from different people's perspectives and came up with some really, really good conclusions at the end as well. So if anyone hasn't seen it, I would really recommend that you watch it, because it's brilliant. Yeah, and really educational as well.
Thank you very much, Alice. I appreciate that a lot. And we made that film. We put that film out, and in the following month, we come up with our kind of plan, which we're calling Barefoot Blades. It's like, how can we at Barefoot Man? I mean, we're a project that started. You know this, and I think most of the viewers will know this, but I'll give a quick recap for anybody who doesn't. We started as a student naked calendar back in 2009. We launched our the Warwick Rowers 2010 calendar was our first product. And this year we've got our 16th calendar out. Now we're called Barefoot Man, and our 2025 calendar is our 16th. But we were, the Warwick Rowers calendar was based on straight rowers, actually, a rowing team at an English university who wanted to raise some money for their boat club. And I, as a queer man, said to them, well, if you want to raise money for your boat club, the people who will pay the most to see you take your clothes off in a calendar will be gay men. How do you feel about that? And they were like, why are you even asking us? And I'm like, well, because when I was at university, that would have been the end of the conversation. It would have been no way. And they were like, really? And I'm like, yeah. So are you saying that you feel differently? And they were like, yeah, we have no problem at all with gay men looking at us naked. Why would we? And I'm like, well, a lot of gay men actually had a really horrible experience in sport. And so sport is kind of almost like a triggering area. A lot of gay men have a little bit of PTSD from their time in sport at school, because this is where ideals of a certain kind of masculinity are really reinforced. It doesn't happen in French class or math class or whatever. I mean, maybe it does a little in math, but because it's seen as a very male subject. But sport was where you had to shape up and be a man. So if you didn't kind of fit into that, you were excluded. And the National Union of Students did research. I mean, it's not quite old. This is back in 2012. They did research that showed that sporting students who take part in sport at university are 50% less likely to take part in team sport if they're LGBT. So queer athletes at university are likely to do solo sports, track and field, swimming, whereas their straight counterparts are more likely to be involved in team sport. And this really affects people's life chances, because companies that recruit from universities, they really are looking for the people who can show that they're well socialized, that they know how to integrate into team working. And this is one of the reasons that students take part in team sports, and it's a known route to giving yourself an advantage in the job market as a graduate, to have taken part in team sport. So effectively, this is a kind of exclusion that has a real impact on life chances. It's not just about whether you get to be good at PE, and whether you're the kind of the alpha jock that looks good on a beach. This is, whether or not you're going to get that job that you want when you graduate. I said to the guys, do you realize that if you do this, you might be helping gay men to overcome their sense of exclusion in sport and actually recover from that trauma? And they were like, well, where do we undress? Because we would love to do that. We would love to be part of that healing process. And ever since then, our project has been about how men can contribute to other people's healing, and by doing so, how they can actually also heal themselves. And so when #MeToo arrived, we incorporated that into our message, because we thought this isn't just about straight men and gay men anymore. We realized that men's behavior has this massive impact on women. And of course, we should have known that, but none of us were women. So it took #MeToo for us to reflect on that. And then Black Lives Matter happened, and it's like, gosh, straight white men really are at the top of a kind of structural inequality pyramid. And we all of us, whoever we are, whatever our characteristics are, we need to be mindful of our privilege, because privilege is, it can be seen as an asset, but it must also be seen as a responsibility. You can't stop your privilege, but you can take responsibility for how you use it. And if you use it to change things for the better, then it's a gift. And I believe that if you don't, if you simply take advantage of your privilege to get more in the short term, I think in the long term it becomes a curse. So that was how we decided that really we should encourage men to, we could expand our the way that we deliver our message with WNBR by developing this idea for Barefoot Blades, which, I mean, you and I talked a little bit about it last when we spoke. But what were your thoughts about that?
I mean, I think it's a really, really great idea. I think there's so much kind of in this day and age about people feeling really ashamed of their privilege
Yes.
and kind of wanting to hide it and pretend that they don't have it, which I think is the worst thing that you can do, because pretending that you don't have a privilege and being ashamed of it is like, you know, you're hiding from it, and it's like you're not appreciating it. And so I think anyone in a privileged position in life, whether it, you know, no matter what kind of privilege it is, you know, there's no point in having that privilege if you can't use it and really, really make the most of it. And so I think the Barefoot Blades idea is really, really brilliant. Yeah.
Well, for people who haven't read our article from our July 2024 edition of Roar Portfolio, we looked at our history as a project, as a naked calendar, and our coffee table books that we've done, and our films, and there were a couple of things that leapt out at me. One was in 2017, we went to a beach in Spain, near where I live. I'm in Spain at the moment, and we got guys to stand on a public nude beach naked. There were quite a lot of gay men enjoying watching this spectacle, I have to say, which maybe also was at the back of my mind. And we got these men to paint slogans on each other, like "Love is love," "Allies forever," "You belong in sport," things like this. And they were painting these messages on each other's bodies. And it was sort of graffiti, but our point was that graffiti is normally something that people who have no voice or have to stay hidden, this is something they do at night. Graffiti happens at night, and it shows up in the morning. And in this piece of work that we did for our it was for one of our books. I think it was for our 2017 book. Yeah. We took men who were incredibly privileged, and we got them to paint graffiti on each other's naked bodies on a nude beach in public in bright sunshine. And I thought that's a nice element to bring to WNBR. And the other thing that I wanted to draw on was that in 2022, I think it was, we encountered this incredible guy, this extraordinary looking black guy with long, amazing dreads. He's an artist, and he came along to help us at a sport inclusion conference in Birmingham where we were speaking. And he was there to man our stall. And he agreed to put on one of our old onesies that we had, these like lycra onesies. And he looked incredible in this purple lycra onesie. And I said, how would you feel about, doing a nude shoot with us? And he was like, yeah, no problem. I said, what sports do you do? And he's like, well, I was like a champion rollerblader. I was like, I love that. We've been talking for a while about the idea of like naked men on roller skates. So how about that? We'll do naked rollerblading. So it was actually one of the times we got a female photographer in. I was somewhere else. I couldn't do it. So she was in London, and we got Lane down to London and shot him doing naked rollerblading. And I thought, let's put those two things together. Let's put men on rollerblades, because that requires a level of skill and dexterity. And I want to keep the focus that we've always had on people from the world of sport. And I think it's particularly relevant for WNBR because we want men who can be athletic about whizzing around and perhaps, intervening if there's a problem somewhere, or if they see an opportunity to do some advocacy on behalf of women, on behalf of gay men, whatever. if they can see a gay man that they think needs supporting by having some hot naked athlete coming up to them on rollerblades, why not? That's the kind of thing that we've always been doing with Warwick Rowers, Worldwide Rower, and now Barefoot Man. We thought, well, we'll get guys on rollerblades, we'll do graffiti body painting. Maybe people will be able to come up and paint on their bodies with permission, obviously. And we'll give them training in how to deliver positive messaging around mindful masculinity, how men need to manage the male gaze, how they need to feel less entitled, how they need to be less aggressive, more empathetic towards the experience that women have. And this is an opportunity for these men also, I think, to experience vulnerability themselves. It's very difficult for men to imagine what it's like to be a woman. I remember I was involved in a campaign called #YesAllMen not long after the murder of Sarah Everard. We were on a Zoom call with Jess Phillips, who's a Labour MP, and in the UK government. I'm not sure what her role is, but I think she's got some sort of ministerial role now, hasn't she? I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either, but she was on a Zoom call with us speaking about her experiences as a woman, like saying that, she's a mother with kids. She goes down the street to buy a pint of milk from the corner shop, and the chances are that some guy will think that because she's walking down the street, he's allowed to say, oh, love your tits, or get your tits out, or nice arse, or, it's like, where did that permission come from? That comes from a set of rules that guy has grown up with. That comes from an expectation that he has been given. That comes from somewhere. And we really need to change those perceptions, because you were saying, I think earlier, it seems extraordinary at this point that we still have this problem of people not being respectful. But I think that until we really make, the culture has shifted a lot. There are things that we learn not to say. A lot of people have become less overtly racist, less overtly ageist, less overtly body fascist, if you like. But it's like, we haven't really eradicated all this, and I think, hasn't it become almost like they talk about the culture wars. It can feel a little bit like a battle, and I don't know if it feels that way to you, but we did a podcast recently where we talked about how guys are becoming less feminist, and more misogynistic when you get down to younger men. So, I don't know what age you are, but men your age are actually testing in research as more misogynistic, less pro-feminism, because they're feeling embattled, they're feeling scared, and they're actually beginning to sort of say, they're treating it as a zero-sum game. If I lose power, you get power, but I don't get anything. It's like, and it's why you have people like Andrew Tate being very, he's tapped into something that young men really like, because they feel that their identity is being challenged. They feel that their life chances are being challenged. And we're trying to say it's the opposite. This is about increasing your life chances. What do you think about that?
I'm not sure where those statistics have come from. I'm 23, by the way, but I think certainly, like, the men that I spend my time with, my friends that are guys, I certainly wouldn't say they're misogynistic. I think I've had guy friends really stand up for me in situations where they have needed to, and I've been very impressed by it. But maybe I shouldn't be impressed by it, maybe it should just be the norm that guys stand up for girls when needs be. But to go back to the whole kind of privilege thing, I think it's actually not like all doom and gloom for women. I think it's phenomenal that I even can go to this bike ride and do what I did, because 50 years ago, there is no way I would have been able to do that without like way, way, way more discrimination and sexism than I experienced on the day this year. And even though I felt threatened when I was doing it, I didn't go home. I didn't put my clothes on. I felt like me being there was still an act of defiance, an act of protest, an act of trying to push forward what I believe needs to be pushed forward. Because, you know, the more people stand up for themselves, the more normal that becomes. Hopefully in the long run, like, the less discrimination will happen because of it. In terms of like men feeling threatened, I think it's a really interesting one. I think a lot of different men have very different perspectives on it. I think people of my generation are probably feeling less threatened from my experience and the people that I've spoken to. But when I speak to people of my parents' generation, it's a very, very different story. And certainly, like, I can think of some of my dad's friends who have made like a lot of like comments towards me, and I am constantly having to re-educate them and tell them that they can't say that anymore and explain why they can't say that anymore. And they definitely feel like their male entitlement is being threatened.
And do you mind me jumping in to ask you to give me examples of the kind of things that your dad's friends say? Because that sounds pretty horrific, actually.
So I've got one of his friends, won't name him, but I
No.
might send him this podcast afterwards because I'm sure he'll laugh. So he was at my parents' house the other day. I was there, and then he was leaving, and he said, "Oh, Alice, like, let me give you a big kiss goodbye." And he comes and gives me a big sloppy kiss on the cheek. And I said, "Are you going to ask my little brother for a kiss on the cheek goodbye? And are you going to ask my dad for a kiss on the cheek goodbye? And are you going to kiss them like that?" And I can't remember what his response was, but he was quite shocked by it. And he then said, "Yes, of course I want to kiss your dad." And then he kind of grabs my dad really sarcastically and like kind of almost attacks him, like all very jokingly. But I think my point was made quite clear.
Yes.
And then he then proceeded to say, he walked out the room, and then he proceeded, as I kind of shouted something at him, I can't remember what, and he proceeded to say, "What's the point in being friends with young women if I can't kiss them?" And I was just like, I was disgusted. I was so shocked by it. And, you know, he was really trying to antagonize me. I know this guy like so well that he kind of knows that he can get away with it because I've known him for such a long time, but it doesn't make it any better. And as much as that final comment was a joke, the fact that he can still think that that's funny really shows that there's like still a lot of improvement to happen.
Wow. I mean, sorry, I just have to repeat that. It's like, what's the point of me or other men like me trying to be friends with young women if we cannot kiss them?
I mean, that was like a stretch, you know, that's like probably one of the most extreme examples that I can give, but it's an example that has happened within, I think it happened in the last 2 years. But that, again, I can't imagine anyone of my generation saying that. And quite recently, actually, I was in a situation at work. I was doing some research on toxic masculinity, and I was reading this blog post, and I can't remember who wrote it, but she said she interviewed a lot of men, and she said, "What's your favourite thing about being a man?" And most of the people that answered didn't really have an answer, because all they could think of about being a man was like negative things. And they said that they feel like they've just been taught that there's nothing good about being a man anymore. And so then I started to ask everyone that I was meeting, well, all the male people that I was spending time with, "What do you love about being a man?" And most of them had very similar responses. They kind of just didn't really know what to say. Or if they did have something to say, they were quite ashamed to say it. Or you know, they didn't know if it was like politically correct to say it. And I tried to make them feel as comfortable as they could and say, you know, like, you can say whatever you want. Like, I'm not going to judge you for it. And I mean, really, like, no one could give me much of an answer, which, I mean, in that sense, I think it is sad, because there's nothing wrong with being a man, you know, like, there's nothing wrong with being a woman. You know, you should be proud of whoever you are. But I don't really know how to navigate teaching men that feminism is not a threat on masculinity. I think it's really difficult because it clearly has been misinterpreted, and how we reinterpret that, I don't know.
I think it's really interesting. I mean, first of all, the research that I was quoting earlier was done by King's College. So, and I think it's not the first time I've had pause to reflect on the fact that our experience, like, for example, the experience that I had with the Warwick rowers was of men who came from, a lot of them were privately educated. They came from quite sophisticated backgrounds. You know, they were not first generation going to university, for example. They were second or third or fourth generation going to university. They were so they had been brought up with liberal values, not necessarily left-wing values, but socially liberal. You know, they may never, I mean, some of them had never met a gay man before me, at least they hadn't realized as they had, but they already knew that, you know, theoretically, that it was not right to discriminate against gay people because they'd been brought up with those values. And so it made it easier for them to do this project, but they were still, in a way, kind of change leaders because so many men are not like them. And that's part of their privilege, is that they did grow up with those values. And it's like, but how would anybody ever have known they had those values if they hadn't got naked in a calendar? By doing that calendar, people all over the world, in places which are a lot less liberal, were able to see men doing something that was entirely shocking and unexpected for them. For a lot of people outside our circles, outside, like the families of the boys who did the calendar, were always pretty supportive. I'm friends with quite a lot of the parents of the guys who took part in the calendar, and they thought it was a fantastic project. But a lot of the people in the wider world were like, how on earth did you get these guys to do this? Because this is not in their interests. This is, you know, so there was very much this idea that these guys had to be gay. And I'm like, well, they're not gay, they're straight. Well, then why would they do it? What's in it for them? And that is what you're talking about, this idea that men will only be supportive, they'll only be allies if there's something in it for them. And they're actually losing power by being allies. They're losing power if they're feminist. They're losing power by being respectful. Sorry, I have a little one that needs a little attention. It's what I'm saying is that you similarly in your circle don't meet the men who are probably, you know, Andrew Tate supporters, but they are out there and they're growing in number, unfortunately, and that is something that we have to address, because at the moment we're kind of assuming that people understand that it's best to do the right thing and do the decent thing. And the Warwick rowers understood that, and people who've taken part ever since have been doing it on that basis. But a lot of men would think it was in the middle of a podcast, would think it was inappropriate. So I think that's where I come back to this Barefoot Blades idea, because it's an opportunity for men to be public about affirming their support for change. It's about men being able to then articulate what benefits they got from that, because the Warwick rowers can articulate the benefits that they got from taking part in our project. All the men who've taken part in our project are able to talk about it as a liberating experience, a learning experience, an opportunity to gain perspectives they would never otherwise have had, meet people outside their normal social networks. It's a really positive thing. And I think that we need to show men that Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson and the Red Pill community, these guys are not selling healing for men. They're selling more sickness. They're making men double down on ways of behaving that ultimately don't really deliver for them. I mean, it's like they end up being foot soldiers in somebody else's army, living by rules that don't serve them, but that maybe keep a few people like Andrew Tate in Rolex watches, although I suspect his Rolex watches might be fake. But you know, these people who are effectively benefiting. It's a bit of a grift. Well, like Trump, you know, they're benefiting from selling this idea of the need for old school masculinity. We must maintain patriarchal power. We have to keep these structures in place. And it's like, yeah, well, you would say that because you're right at the top of the structure. But actually, you're right at the top of a structure and you're a scared little boy. So you're a scared little boy standing on the ledge of a tall building. Amazing. But they're frozen and they're terrified. And so that's my take on that. I mean, I'm thinking we've got about 10 minutes left. So I want to, because I know that you and I have talked in our last conversation, we talked about what we could do. So tell me a little bit more, Alice, about what you actually do and how you would like to develop things in the future.
So I'm currently studying journalism at Goldsmiths University, and I really want to go into kind of human rights or anthropological documentary making. I've already done quite a lot of it just for my own YouTube channel. I've made documentaries, very amateur documentaries, all over the world, actually. I've done communities in Egypt, indigenous groups in Bolivia, made one about sex workers in Guatemala, and I want to continue doing that. And I really want to focus on kind of like people's life stories and people's perspectives, as opposed to the kind of like wider news spectrum, which tends to be quite political. I want to really like get to the human beings behind that. And I think that's why I really, really loved the documentary that you made, because I think, like, you know, nudity and feminism and sexism is a political issue. But what you've done in the film is kind of like gone behind the politics of it and actually just kind of taken a real life situation and talked to the people about it, heard their voices, and, you know, provided a really balanced perspective on what's happened.
Thank you very much. And let's give a shout out for your YouTube channel, by the way. I didn't know you had one. Where do we find that?
On YouTube, and the username is It's Alice Chapman.
It's Alice Chapman. Well, we
with
can
the
put a link.
It's at the beginning, if that makes sense.
Alice Chapman.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So we'll put it in the links as well, but and try and add a little on-screen message, and we'll mention that in the magazine. So you mentioned this when we spoke, and I thought, well, we want to create this Barefoot Blades project, and so I asked you if you would be interested in maybe being involved. And so what have you decided?
I would absolutely love to be involved in it. Yeah, if you make anything similar to the documentary that you made about this year for the next bike ride, I would be absolutely honoured to be a part of that and helping you guys with it.
Amazing. Well, that is a deal, because I think that we want to start designing this project. We want to start talking to people, you know, like in the rollerblading community. We want to get artists involved. We want to get women involved. We want to start running focus groups on how do we want to train the men who come along to take part? What should that training look like? How do we ensure that it's not just me just thinking, here's what's good? It's like, it's got to be more voices involved in the development of this. And so I think that that's a whole process that we should start to document. And I was actually speaking to somebody from UAL, the University of Arts for London.
Yeah.
She's very keen. She thinks it's a great concept. And we were having a meeting with one of the videographers from our project, who was actually the guy with long hair who was doing filming for us. His name's Tom. And the three of us sat down just on my last night in London, actually, 2 days ago, and talked about it. So I think that we're starting to get a team together of people who can help to move this forward. And I am so excited that you're going to be part of it, because, you know, you and Jen and the other women who were in that little group that we met at Forum Magnum Square, you were the inspiration for it. You really were. So, yeah. And Goldsmiths, for those who don't know, is a very good university in London.
You're flattering me.
Well, probably, but it is a very good university. So, so well done, and congratulations. Yeah, congratulations on achieving your own YouTube channel, actually. When did you start that?
I started it quite a long time ago, actually. I think maybe 4 years ago, when I started hitchhiking all over the world as a 19-year-old girl on my own.
Wow.
And so that's kind of what the channel is about. I haven't posted in a long time because I've been doing university. I haven't been traveling a huge amount, but I'm really, really looking forward to kind of going on a few more trips and getting the channel up and running again, because I absolutely love making videos about the kind of adventures that I go on, especially as a woman. And I really, really want to encourage other women to do it and show that the world is really not as much of a dangerous place as we are taught that it is. And yeah, always up for inspiring people to go on an adventure, because I think it's life-changing, and it's really important not to live in fear. And that's the kind of message that I want to promote to people through my channel. And just through being alive, you know, not just on my channel. Yeah.
No, you're living it. Because I remember when we talked last time, you were saying, yeah, I mean, I don't mind nudity in social situations, but it's always been on like at a festival or a hippie retreat, or and so it was kind of weird to have all these people who weren't participants who were there for kind of weird reasons. And but you're clearly intrepid, you're clearly an adventurer, and you're a change leader, Alice.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, to go back to like my previous experience being naked in kind of like public situations, I am aware that we're going to go over time. I don't know if you can like
no, that's fine.
Put it further back or something. But
no, it doesn't. Like, we're not limited.
I've had a lot of experience being nude in big groups of people who have also all been nude. And my experience is that when you're in a situation like that with a lot of people who are also naked, it becomes like the most normal thing ever. And it actually feels a lot more normal and a lot more natural than wearing clothes. And for someone that's never experienced that, it might sound quite hard to believe, but trust me, it is like how it is. And so I think, and it's also completely unsexualized, you know, when your body is naked and you're with that many people and you're just kind of like doing your thing at a festival or at a hippie commune, you know, you're not in a sexual situation, and the naked body is completely unsexualized. And that's kind of how I thought it would be at the World Naked Bike Ride. I think I forgot that I was in central London and that there would be many people that would have access to it that weren't part of this community. And suddenly I was in this big group, but my body was completely sexualized. And I think that was what the shock was. You know, I was doing a completely unsexual thing, riding a bike in London, like I do every single day. But I was hypersexualized, and the men, I don't think were, unless they were kind of like sexualizing themselves. There was nothing that I was doing that was sexualizing myself, but I was seen in that way. And I
Yeah.
think that was what really
I
shocked
think
me.
that's,
Yeah.
I think that's yeah, I absolutely see that and get that. I think that's a very helpful perspective, I think. I do know that, like with my experience with the guys on the Barefoot Man Warrior Rowers project, some of the men, a lot of the men have never spent extended time naked with other people or even just by themselves. It's like, I always kind of like, I can wander around my place when it's warm. I'm quite isolated, up a mountain, and I'm not overlooked. So I can like wander out into the garden naked and wander around the house naked. And I do, but a lot of people don't do that. I realize, but I remember on shoots, it was interesting that men who sort of like, well, we're part of a sports team, so of course we see each other naked. And then they realized that they never actually looked at each other. It was like the rule was you couldn't look at each other. So after they'd been naked for 6 hours on a calendar shoot, they would actually sort of say, do you know, I've been meaning to ask you, what's it like to be circumcised or uncircumcised? Or, do you trim your pubes? Or, I mean, they had all kinds of questions, lots of questions about like, what's your training regime? Of course, all that stuff, but also more intimate stuff, like, just even talking about penis size. It's like our project has always included penises of all different sizes. And this was the first time these guys had actually been able to say, what's it like having a big dick? Or, does it get bigger when it gets hard? That kind of thing, that they were able to have these conversations for the first time. And I think it's really telling that they hadn't been able to do that before. Whereas I think women are much more unboundaried about having those kinds of conversations. Like, you'll discuss each other's breasts and bodies. And I mean, maybe that's partly because your bodies are so scrutinized, but also because you seem to be able to talk to each other about it where men can't.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I'm constantly talking about things like that with my girlfriends, and I think it's something that men probably don't talk about as much. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a man, and I'm never in the room when it's only men in the room. And so I don't actually know, but certainly from what like my guy friends have told me in terms of the kind of like conversations surrounding like sex and bodies and things like that, I think women do talk in a lot more depth about it. Yeah, for sure. So I think it's really important for men to kind of like have those conversations and feel comfortable with each other like that, and just actually like not be ashamed of being a man. Like I have kind of, like girls' nights with my girlfriends all the time, and like can really just bond over like being female. And I don't know if men have that. Maybe they do. I hope they do. But I think certainly it's like a lot easier for women to bond over that, probably because you can kind of like bond over that point of vulnerability.
Yes. I mean, I think sometimes men bond over their shared desire for women more than their ability to share vulnerability with each other. I think perhaps it's a very different kind of bonding experience. But what we've discovered in our project is that men can bond over vulnerability, and they can get a kick out of it, and get stuff from it. And so I'm hoping that, what started with our interview at Forum Magnum Square can actually have a lot of benefits for everyone if we can grow this into a global, I suppose, what would we call it, an intervention, if you like, a global intervention where we encourage men to show up and take part in WNBR in this specific way, and we prepare them for it. And it's about, I mean, it's about promoting behavior change. It's about showing men that there are other ways forward. It's about showing women and queer men and non-binary people that that just because somebody is born with the privilege of being straight white male doesn't mean that they're a write-off. They can actually be allies and join the rebel forces,
Yeah.
which I think is really important because we need more of those guys to come and join the rebel forces, right?
Yeah, certainly. And I think just like a really important message to put across is that like I really don't want men to be feeling alone and like they're threatened at all. And there is no shame in being a white man at all. You know, there's no shame in being a man at all. And I think that really needs to be like enforced somehow. Well, not enforced, like, I don't know what the right word
No,
is.
you're absolutely right, Alice. I mean, that's
People need to like understand that, but I don't know how to get that understanding across because so far what's happened is like the opposite through feminism. Men have been made to kind of like feel ashamed. Well, I don't know if they've been made to feel ashamed. They've kind of taken it as like, oh, I need to feel ashamed, but that shouldn't be the case at all. Yeah.
I think, this is a lot of this is to do with the social media age where people are looking for an angle, and the angle is always about how can they get attention, and then how can they monetize that or convert it in. How can they convert that attention into either power or money? And so it's not that feminism made men this way. It's feminism was an expression of women wanting to throw. It was about women recognizing that they needed a fairer deal. The only people who change things really are the people who either don't get a good deal, don't get a fair deal, or the people who are sensitive and smart enough and good enough to spot that even if they have a good deal, other people don't. Most people are not that good. Most people act out of self-interest. And so it will always be, it's never going to be heterosexuals who will fight for gay rights. They can get on board. They're never going to start the revolution. It's always going to have to be gay people who start the revolution. It's always going to have to be women who start the revolution, Black people who start the revolution, because we're the first to see that this sucks and stuff needs to change. And that's where I think that privilege is a bit of a handicap in some ways, because you're the least likely to see your privilege because that's just life for you. And is that not fair? Kind of feels okay to me. I'm having a good time. So we really struggle, but privilege is an opportunity because if you have privilege, you have power and you can use that power. But the thing where feminism didn't make men feel this way. Men saw that they could tap into anxiety that feminism was causing men, and they could exacerbate it. They could pour accelerant onto it and get a nice big fire going. And that's what people like Andrew Tate have done, in my opinion. So this is not the fault of feminism, the fault of bad actors.
No, for sure. Definitely. Yeah.
Well, I guess on that note, we should wrap things up. But I've really, really enjoyed talking to you, Alice. And I really look forward to working with you over the coming months on developing this project. And I know that our supporters and our subscribers at Barefoot Man are going to love the idea that Alice and I have a goal here, which does include seeing a lot of hot men naked. So, don't worry, we're never going to let you down there. We know that is the healing energy that a lot of our subscribers need. And I think a lot of people need the healing energy of seeing men go through a process that enables them to become better men and also get naked, perhaps. So if you're done with that, Alice, we have work to do.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited for the coming months and to see where this project takes us. It's been amazing talking to you. And I think after the naked bike ride this year, I just felt like, oh my goodness, I've got so much I need to say. And I think this platform has really allowed me to do that. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Alice. And speak to you very soon.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks again. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
spinning, grinning, let the streets unwind. First photography gig, new lens, fresh find. Naked bikers pass, bodies art aligned. Snapping shots of smiles, feeling out of my mind. 2009 summer sunlit through the haze. Bikes and bodies blend in a joyful craze. Rookie photog in the crowd, eyes amazed. Clicking shutters cause I'm lost in the daze. Bare wheel shutter sound, city's heart pounds. Laughing crowds, freedom found all round. Men on bikes, life unbound. Joy resounds, capturing moments, good vibes all surround. Bare wheel shutter sound, city's heart pounds. Laughing crowds, freedom found all round. Men on bikes, life unbound. Joy resounds, capturing moments, good vibes all surround.